welcome everybody. We're still waiting for a few people, I think, just based on registration. But welcome. Thanks for coming to one of our psychology alumni events. We're really excited to have Heather Haas here. So she's going to be talking a lot about her career path to PharmaFinders, where she is now, and how she leveraged her liberal arts degree from Michigan in our department to get to where she is now in her career. So she'll be taking questions throughout. Please feel free to grab refreshments throughout the presentation if you would like. There's a sign-in sheet in the back and also Heather's business cards. So if you want to grab those on your way out and sign in, that'd be great. Okay, cool. I'll turn over to Heather.
Well, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Heather Haas. I graduated in 2014 from this exact department almost 10 years ago. This building looks completely different when I went to school here, so it's beautiful. And I'm really excited to be back. I picked, I think, a good weekend. There's not too much snow on the ground. I live in Dallas. I don't know if there's any out-of-staters here, but I was from Texas and went to Michigan, so the winter drove me back to Texas after I graduated. Is anybody else from out of state here? All Michigan people? Really?
I'm from Chicago.
Cool, okay. Yeah, that's close. Very cool, that's awesome. Well, I'm excited to get to talk today. Thank you, Rachel, and thank you to the psychology department for asking me to speak. Do you guys know, I'd love to just ask a quick question before we get started. Do you guys know, anybody in this room know what you want to do with your career right this moment? You do? Okay, good. One. I did not. I would not have been raising my hand if I was in your spot. It took me a couple years to decide what I wanted to do with my career. In undergrad, I didn't really know. And a couple years after I graduated, to be honest, it took me some time to really land on my feet and figure out what you can do. And so I'm excited to talk about that journey. I'll land on PharmaFinders, and then I'll talk a little bit about a different career path that I have as well. But before I get into that, thank you, Rachel, for coordinating this. Thank you to the psychology department for asking me to speak. I'm really excited to do this. So here's kind of our discussion points. So I'm going to start with the major that I graduated in, BCN. I think that'll help you guys understand a little bit more about why I chose my career path and the path that I did take. So we'll talk briefly about my BCN major and why I decided to stick with that one. And then, like I alluded to, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my career for some time after graduating. So I'll start with my first career path, which was pre-physician assistant school. That was kind of my first track. We'll move then into my second career path, which is recruiting. We'll then land on my current job at PharmaFinders as the Vice President and Principal Talent Executive. And then we're going to completely shift gears. And because I recruit specifically within a space, which is an MSL, a medical science liaison in the medical affairs department. So I'll switch from talking about myself and my career, and then we'll move to a different career path. And then I'll just end with career tips and give you guys plenty of times to ask questions. However, if anything's unclear, because it is kind of a smaller group, I want you guys, feel free, raise your hand, ask questions throughout. I want this to be as beneficial as you guys want. So don't be shy, ask questions. So, are there questions now before we get started? No? Okay, cool. All right, so I think in order, like I said, to understand my career path, you have to start with why I graduated with what I did. I graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Biopsychology, Cognition, and Neuroscience. I changed my major a couple times in college. If you guys couldn't tell, I didn't know what to do, so I went, I was looking at athletic training, I was looking at biology, and I stuck with the Department of Psychology and BCN for a couple of reasons. One, I loved the versatility of the classes that you got to take, right? So I took the psychology of decision making. I took a hormones and behaviors class. I took a biology class, an immunology class. So I got to kind of pick and choose, which is why I personally landed on the BCN degree. Another reason too why I picked the BCN degree is because I felt like it was a perfect mix between psych and true science. You know, I got to blend a lot of those courses together, and I felt that it was the perfect in-between middle road from psychology to true neuroscience. So that's why I landed on and graduated with this degree in 2014. There we are when I was picking up my degree from the Alumni Center. And my goal when I graduated from here was I was going to continue my education and go to graduate school and become a physician assistant. So because I had changed my major a couple of times here, I had not completed all the prereqs to become a PA. And so I moved back down to Dallas from where I'm from, and I took a couple classes at the college there. While I was doing that, I also realized I needed a lot more clinical experience. So that's where I landed my first job as a medical scribe. I worked at a large scribing company called Physicist Scribes. They no longer exist. They're known now by Scribe America. I think they've got a couple programs in the Detroit area, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with them at all. This was an awesome experience. Truly, if you're wondering about going into medicine, a scribe, I was next to a physician the entire time in a physician shift. So, as a medical scribe, do you guys know what a medical scribe is, what they do? No? Okay. So basically, if you think about it, so scribes are in the emergency room and they are working with an attending. An attending will see 30 to 40 complex patients throughout a shift, right? And they have no control over when those patients come in, what type of state they're in. And so charting is the last thing on a doctor's mind. And you have to chart a patient's interaction, what was done in order to bill, in order to make money at the hospitals and things like that. And so hospitals use scribes to take notes hands-on. And so anytime they saw a patient, I was there with a laptop documenting history of present illness, review of symptoms. I was documenting at what time an IV was happening, if there was CPR, if there was anything going on, I was documenting it. I learned so much about direct patient care because I was in it. I was witnessing it firsthand, and I loved my job as a scribe. I did really well, which is why I ended up moving up in the scribing program. So I moved to a trainer pretty quickly, and then I moved up to the chief medical scribe. And the chief medical scribe was the boss of the on-ground team of scribes. So they had a corporate office, but I was the liaison on the grounds discussing what the physicians needed, making sure shifts were covered 24/7, making sure the physicians were happy with what we were doing. So I feel that I was extremely successful and able to move up because I liked what I was doing. What was kind of cool too about working at a hospital like Children's Health, it was connected to a university hospital. So these attendings had residents and fellows next to them, shadowing and seeing the patients. So these doctors loved teaching the scribes. They would ask me, this patient, what would you do? What would be your first plan of care? What medication would you treat them with? So I learned so much about how to truly treat patients in an ER as a scribe, and I loved it. However, working in an ER can be tough. 24/7 shifts, my phone was on all the time. So I was kind of getting a little burnt out by running the scribe program. And at this point, I was starting to apply to PA school my first time. And so I was thinking, based on this PA application cheat sheet, how do I continue to strengthen my background to get into PA school? So I decided I needed to strengthen my recommendations and also maybe gain a different patient care perspective. So I found a private practice clinic, and that leads us to my next job as an administrator at a small clinic of 8 people, I believe it was. And it was at this place called One CP Place, CP standing for cerebral palsy. It was a really unique experience. The physician herself had cerebral palsy, and she only treated patients potentially with that disease from 18 months on to their life. They had physical therapists in the office, and I was kind of the jack of all trades in this position. I was scribing for her again, so taking notes of what she was doing with the patients. I was helping with scheduling. They also do a lot of gait videos. Cerebral palsy patients have a lot of movement disorders as well. So making sure that the videos that the physician was taking were accurate. Really cool, unique experience that I felt that based on this application cheat sheet again, I was checking off a lot of boxes, right? So I was ready to go, submitting my applications to PA school, got them all in, was ready to hear back, and I didn't get in. So I was like, okay, first time, it's all right, people take a little bit, so let's see what I can do to continue to strengthen my resume. So I was trying to figure out where I want to go next, and I actually was approached by my old boss at Physicist Scribes about coming back and working in the corporate office instead of the hospital setting. And at that point, I wanted a little bit more of a stable paycheck, benefits, things like that, and I said, okay, let's see how the corporate side of the hospital can function. So that's where we land on my third job, which was as an operations coordinator at Physicist Scribes. So what this job did, I was now the corporate-facing person in charge of all of the hospitals and the scribing programs in Dallas. So it's about 500 scribes plus 8 different programs, and I was there as the corporate responsibility, making sure compliance was checked, making sure that shifts were covered, that the physicians were happy, and that as a business, we were making money. It was a really cool job. And as I was doing that, I took a GRE class. I passed the GRE, got a good score. I was very happy about that. And I was ready now at this point to apply to PA school again. I had checked it all off. I felt pretty good about this. And again, I did not get into PA school, and this was round 2. And I was really starting to think, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to keep applying for a third time? Am I going to switch my career? I really was having this kind of internal struggle of what else is out there? What can I do? And I was really ready to move away from Physicist Scribes, which was being bought out by the time by Scribe America, like I mentioned earlier. So I was on LinkedIn, easy applying, finding any job, and my initial thought was, okay, if I want to still do PA school and want to apply a third year, maybe let's go into research. When I was in Michigan, I took an observational method lab for 1 semester for credit, and then I ended up just volunteering for a year and a half after because I loved it. Really cool lab. It was studying the BPA levels in offspring from the mom to the baby in sheep. I got to transcribe videos. I got to take the samples of the brain. I got to splice them, put them on the slides. It was a really cool job. So I was like, okay, research may be a really great route for me if I want to still go to PA school, and maybe if I don't, if I end up not wanting to apply a third time, maybe I'll find a new career path as a researcher. So I'm starting to hear back from some companies, and I got an interview request from a very small firm, and the position was researcher. And I start to do a little bit more digging, and I find out that the position that I had applied for was a researcher for a recruiting firm. And at first I was like, I don't know about this. This isn't the research I was thinking about, working for a recruiting firm. But I took the interview because I didn't want to say no, and I ended up learning that the company recruited and partnered with pharmaceutical and biotech companies. So I was like, okay, still in the science, so let's continue. And then after an hour of talking with this person, they go, you can talk. Have you ever thought about recruiting yourself? And no, I had absolutely never, ever thought about staffing and recruiting as a career path, ever. I can tell you that for certain. So the reason I was really terrified about recruiting was because I thought initially that recruiters were a lot like telemarketers. You're calling people, you're bugging them about things they don't want to hear about, you're selling them on things, and I also found out it was a commission pay structure, which meant that what you made was not guaranteed. The harder you work, the more people you place, the more money you make. Made me a little worried. I ended up talking with them and had additional interviews, like I said, because they worked in the pharmaceutical and biotech space. They partnered with companies like Pfizer or like Merck to place candidates. So I thought with my BCN major and all my scientific training, I could at least bring that piece to the role. Now, what does a recruiter do? Continued to interview with this company, really liked the people, and I took a lot of time, reflected on it, and I said, let's do it. The worst that can happen is I don't like the job and I find a new one, right? Well, I joined, and if you look at the job description here, this was the job description on the role that I took as a recruiter at this small recruiting firm of about 10 people. So basically, as a recruiter, your job was to use their database, contact people in it about a particular job, see if there'll be a match personality-wise, resume-wise, make sure they're interested, and then from there, I would send their resume over directly to the pharmaceutical company, help them interview, coach them through interviewing, negotiate their offers, and at the end of the day, hopefully they accept that position. So just a brief run through of the job description there. Sounded pretty cool, and to be honest, I did pretty well. I ended up working at this company for 3 years as a recruiter. I worked with over 40 candidates across the United States with different backgrounds, and I placed them in pharmaceutical companies with oncology backgrounds, rare disease, GI, you name it, anything. I loved what I was doing, and I was extremely specialized in what I was doing, and we will get into that specialty in the second half of this presentation. But recruiting was an excellent path for me, and like I said, I did it for 3 years until I was approached in end of 2020, 2021, about starting a recruiting firm from the ground up. And you know, at first, again, I was a little hesitant. I felt like I had just really cemented my feet in the recruiting space. I felt like I knew what I was doing. I was making good money. I was ready to continue to be successful. Do I want to take another leap of faith and start from scratch and build a company? Well, spoiler, I did it. And that's where PharmaFinders comes into play. So I helped with 2 other co-owners. I helped start PharmaFinders, which is a specialized medical affairs recruiting firm in the pharmaceutical and biotech industry. So for the past 2 years, we've been building this company really, like I said, from the ground up, working with candidates, and we've been doing really, really well. We've made money, which is always good. We've billed over $2 million in just 2 years, and we still work with a lot of different candidates from different backgrounds. It's been really exciting, but I will say I had no idea how to start a business. I talked a lot about the medical terminology and immunology classes that I took here. I did not take a finance class here, and I definitely didn't take a business class here. So how do you start a business, right? Where do you go? Well, I started with Google. It was a great resource, but one resource I really do want to highlight if you ever find yourself wanting to start your own gig, becoming your own boss. Something really cool that most cities and counties offer is a free small business development resource. Cities want your company, they want your business to help generate more income into the city, right? So this small business development center in Dallas, Collin County specifically, they had free seminars, and it was Law 101 on how to start a business that we would attend. And it walked you through step by step every process of starting a business. Then you even had, similar to like a career counselor, you had a business counselor, and they gave you a list of, okay, start here. If you need lawyer recommendations, if you need a CPA recommendation, here's some vetted list of people that you can start with. Really excellent resource that I highly recommend you guys look into if you do ever want to start your own business. And it really helped us from branding to website development, you name it, the stuff that I had no idea. I just wanted to talk to people and stick to the science. So really, really helpful spot. And so now here I am. We're in our 3rd year. We're doing really well. And at this point, PA school is not in my future anymore. I said goodbye to that a couple years ago. And I really feel that I did well in recruiting and have been is because I am passionate about it. And I do love what I'm doing. I love working with people. And we are really specialized, like I mentioned, in medical affairs. And it's a really cool spot that still kept me close to the science. So I am currently the Vice President and Principal Talent Executive at PharmaFinders. I still recruit, so I still talk to people very daily. I will also talk to pharmaceutical companies. So if you work at Pfizer, I'm talking to you about what jobs you need filled. What are your requirements? What do your candidates need? What's a successful medical science liaison at your company? And I'll get to what an MSL is soon, so don't worry. So it's a great job. I've loved it, and I love being my own boss. It's really exciting. It gives me opportunities like this to come and speak to you guys. And it's been a really lucrative path for me as well as a recruiter. So that's just quickly about my career path and what I have been doing. And I know I've referenced a lot about what medical affairs is, which is the space that we recruit in. So before I dive into that career path, do you guys have any questions at this point? No? Okay, cool. All right, we'll keep moving. So, as I referenced, I've been working in medical affairs for 5+ years now. Has anybody heard of medical affairs or a medical science liaison? No? Cool, because I didn't either when I was your age as well. And I think it's a really, really, really cool career path. So I'm excited to kind of dive into. So this is the space that I exclusively recruit for. So if people are talking to me about jobs, this is what I'm recruiting for. So I'm going to kind of bring it back a little bit. So traditionally, everyone knows pharmaceutical companies, biotechs, and I'm just going to label them as pharma companies. That'll include pharma, biotech, device, just to make it easier, diagnostic. I'll just umbrella them as a pharma company. So most people know pharma companies as having two divisions, right? Research and development of new drugs, and then commercializing them and marketing them. This really, in the 1960s, this company called Upjohn Pharmaceuticals, fun fact, was started by a Michigan grad. They were the first company to say, look, there is a huge gap right now in the pharmaceutical companies and talking to the physicians that are prescribing and using these medications. There's not enough information being given to them about new products coming to market and those products that are in clinical development. And so they were really the first ones to create this medical affairs department. So now, almost every pharmaceutical company has 3 main pillars to their business model: research and development, medical affairs, and commercial and market access. What is medical affairs, though? They are educators. They are only there as subject matter experts in a specific therapeutic space, and they are delivering information. So we think a lot about sales. Everyone knows pharma sales, right? Okay. These people are not selling. There's actually a ton of compliance around that. Medical affairs department are truly just giving information to physicians, to healthcare providers about new drugs coming to market. It's a really, really interesting development, especially when we start to think about how our healthcare space has changed and how the need for information. We all want more information on different paths that you can take, different drugs that you can take. And so medical affairs really removed that gap. I'm gonna now focus more, so that is medical affairs as a whole. I wanna even go further into a particular position within the medical affairs department, and that is a medical science liaison, so an MSL. If I say MSL, medical science liaison, the same thing. And so I'm gonna use a very basic example to give you guys kind of an understanding of what an MSL is. So let's say you're a pharma sales rep and you're working on birth control. What is birth control approved for? Preventing birth, right? That's all mainly commercial sales folks can talk about, is what the approved indication is for a drug. Medical science liaisons, on the other hand, can go to a doctor and talk about birth control and how it's really good for acne. It can be really good for mood swings. It can be really good for X, Y, and Z. So it can talk off-label on a drug. The drug doesn't need to be approved to talk about it. And these medical science liaisons are in these physician offices saying, okay, you've got this patient and you're having problems here. Well, here's the data, and here's why you should maybe take this path. And these medical science liaisons can go way more in the weeds than a salesperson can, because a lot of commercial sales folks maybe don't have that in-depth scientific knowledge. So that is the most basic way I can explain an MSL. The job function up here kind of goes a little bit more into the weeds of what an MSL does. So really, okay. So if you see here, medical science liaisons, they work throughout a product's life cycle. So a product life cycle, that is, so MSLs are mainly, I use the birth control example, they're not working with birth control. They're working on new oncology drugs or new JAK inhibitors in dermatology. It's cool, unique drugs that aren't in market yet. So these MSLs, product life cycle, that's working from clinical phase 1 through 4 clinical trials, once the FDA gets submissions, and then afterwards with new approvals. So that's what I mean by product life cycle. They are working from pre-approval to post-approval. And they are there, like I said, as scientific peers and true resources. If you think about it, a physician who is an Alzheimer's expert within their space, they don't have a lot of time. They are always seeing patients. They're in research. So that is why they have these MSLs come and talk to them about new drugs on the market, new approvals and things like that. So they are peers to the physicians to give them that updated information. And then, of course, MSL role is they are meant to create peer-to-peer relationships with those doctors or key opinion leaders. So you'll see that a lot. Key opinion leaders, what that means is there are a lot of physicians out there, right? But there's only a very small subset of specialists that are influencing how treatment is done. So at Michigan, this is a large medicine center that has a lot of influential physicians that are making waves in Alzheimer's, in Parkinson's, in oncology disorders, things like that. Those are the people, those high academic KOLs, that's who the medical science liaisons are targeting. So that's the role I get to work in. It's a really cool role. They work all over, very similar to sales. They have a territory that they cover. So you might be covering Michigan, Ohio, Chicago, you name it. Territories will differ based on what product you're supporting, what drug you're supporting, what physicians you're seeing. So it's a very, very cool role. And I'm going to give you a snapshot of what kind of background an MSL does, or what an MSL is. So there's a really cool organization called the Medical Science Liaison Society. This is a snippet that they have put up of kind of the background and things like that of an MSL. Question? Did you have a question?
I just have a question.
Yeah.
So you're saying, like, I just wanted to clarify.
Yes.
So an MSL is able to talk a little bit more in depth with the physician on what the medication does. But did you say that it could be like an experimental medication, not approved by the FDA yet?
Exactly. A majority of the time, MSLs aren't working with approved drugs. And that actually can sometimes be a negative of this position because drugs fail all the time. So there can be some job insecurity there. But yes, MSLs are only working on novel drugs that have not been approved yet, that are unique, and really there's nothing been seen on the market. So yes. Yeah, of course. So this is a little snippet. And so because these MSLs are really in depth in the science, a lot of them do have a doctorate degree. So if you look here under education, a majority, I would say a majority of the people we work with either have a PharmD or a PhD. We are seeing a lot more masters as well, so NPs, PAs, those that maybe want to get out of direct patient care and want a different impact on their patients in the research side, so they'll transition into medical science liaisons. We'll see like foreign MDs, so those that got an MD maybe out of the country and came back here and didn't want to practice. We'll see that, and then we'll see some bachelors. But I will say a majority of MSLs that I place are either have a PharmD, a PhD, or maybe a DNP even, or I think the Doctorate of Physician Assistant Medicine, I think is the approved one for that one as well. So that's their education level. Pretty split, 50-50, male, female, which is great. And then the therapeutic space. So that's kind of the indicator that you were asking about what products they're working on. So that's why we see a majority of MSLs working in oncology. There's a huge need there. Neurology, rare disease is a huge hotbed in medicine. Lots of pharma companies are pouring in money for research because there's so many diseases that need that medicine. And so that's why those are the 3 biggest buckets we see medical science liaisons work in. Outside of that, you'll see where do they work. Large pharma is the big one. So like we know, Pfizer, Merck, Sanofi, anything like that. I will say personally, we tend to work with smaller to mid-sized pharma companies. The reason for that is because they're just not well known. So I'm kind of their free advertisement, for a lack of a better word. So when I'm talking to candidates, I'm normally working on companies they've never heard of. Let's say a Dermavant, for example. That's a very small dermatology company, if that name didn't give it away. So you can see them in pharma, in diagnostics, in medical device, AI, artificial intelligence is becoming a big space now in pharma as well. So you see them in a lot of different types of companies. And then I think it's kind of helpful as well if you're like, how much money do they make? That's their average. And it's trending upward as well. I will say this changes year to year. When I first started placing candidates 5 years ago, their starting salary was about $120,000. 5 years now, the starting salary is $180,000. It's changing a lot. And the reason for that is because the value that a medical science liaison can bring to a pharmaceutical company is increasing. And so that's why the salary is increasing. And what's kind of cool I like to mention as well, you should not look at just base. They also get a target bonus, a yearly salary bonus. They also get equity in the pharmaceutical companies, which can be really profitable. They get a car or a car allowance. There's a lot of factors at play that make this position really equitable for the people that do it. So that's just a brief view of what type of background an MSL has. And I do want to note that because their educational background is different, the career path that people will take before becoming an MSL can be very different. So a PhD person, they may be a bench scientist, specialized and working just in looking at a specific space in Alzheimer's, and then they transition into an MSL. Then we see PharmDs who work and come from a hospital and then move to an MSL. So there isn't one linear path to becoming an MSL. There's a lot of different ways that you can become an MSL. And again, I want to just clarify, a medical science liaison is just one position within the medical affairs umbrella. There's a lot of different roles. Anytime you see medical affairs though, just know those are educators in the pharma companies. They are not selling, they're not allowed to sell, they are just sharing scientific information. So, very cool role. Now, not every job is just highs, right? That would be silly to even consider that. And so I just want to give you some quick highlights and some quick lows of the position if you decide you want to maybe look at this as your potential career path. So let's start with the highs. So very social role. These are social scientists. A lot of, especially PhDs who are behind the bench, they'll come to us and say they want to become an MSL because they want to socialize. They want to talk to people. And so this is a very relationship-forward position. You are a networker as an MSL, which is maybe why I love recruiting in it, because the people I talk to are so nice. They want to talk to me. They want to share the scientific information with me as well. So to be an MSL, you have to be comfortable giving presentations, talking, and networking. That is one of the biggest pieces that they do. Another thing that's really cool, being on the cutting edge of product innovation and science. So like I said, they're not working on your Zantac, your diabetes drugs. You know, they are working on drugs that you've never heard of, novel mechanisms of actions, gene therapy. Those are really unique, rare spaces. These are the types of drugs and products that medical science liaisons are working with. Ability to dig deep into a science. So if you're somebody that finds yourself going down these rabbit holes in whatever topic it is, medical science liaison role might be for you, because these people will get really in the weeds on a particular topic. Not only are you supposed to be the knowledge master of your drug that you're supporting and the space, but you need to know the competitors. You need to know what else is out there, what else is in phase 2, what else could be potentially being submitted to the FDA. So these people really like to get into the weeds of what they're supporting. The opportunity to travel new places, I think that's a really big highlight, as you can see, depending on your point of view. Like I mentioned earlier, they do cover a territory. Some will be just a state, some will be multiple states. It's very dependent on the physicians that you're meeting with, but you do get the opportunity to go global if you are working with a global pharmaceutical company, anything like that. So if you're somebody who likes to travel, this is a travel position. Patient advocacy. So you work medical affairs because you're educators. You're also supposed to be listening to what is the need. You're meeting with the physician, you're giving them this information. What is something that's potentially lacking? Is there a gap in the data? Is there a gap in clinical trials? So you're there to help make sure that you're working with these patient advocates and getting these patients what they need, so you can make a true impact on healthcare. Flexibility to make your own schedule. So I mentioned you're traveling, but when you're not traveling, you get to work from home. So you get to make your own schedule. There is a lot of flexibility, and people tend to like that. And then the last one that I like to mention is career growth. And I think this is one of the coolest spaces. So a medical science liaison can really be a starting platform in your career. Most people will start as a medical science liaison and move up. But the cool thing is there isn't just one path that you take when you're moving up. So let's say you want to be a lifelong 20+ year medical science liaison. There are a lot of people that do that and absolutely love it. There's other people who want to manage people. So then they'll take that more management career path and become a director, and then a national director, and then a VP. If you don't want to deal with people and personalities, you can still move up as a medical science liaison. You can take more of a strategy approach. You can become a medical director, and that's very different from a medical director in a hospital. A medical director is more really in the weeds of the clinical trials and what's going on there. So there's not one path that you need to take if you want to move up in your career. This is truly just a starting platform, which I think makes it really exciting. So those are the highlights. I'll quickly run through the challenges. So you do have to be self-motivated because you have different schedules. Week by week, it's going to look different for you as a medical science liaison. So you have to be accountable. Travel, I said it as a positive, but some people can see that as a negative. Maybe you don't want to be traveling or on the road or on the airplane all the time. So it can be a disadvantage for some. There are a lot of documenting. So you work on a team as a medical science liaison. So when you're working on a team virtually, you have to take a lot of notes. You have to send these things to corporate. So that is kind of one of the tasks that people don't like. Struggles to find a consistent daily routine, right? If you're on the road traveling a lot, are you eating healthy? Are you working out? Are you doing the things that make you feel good? Some MSLs find difficulty doing that. Physicians access. So a medical science liaison is always meeting with the physician. Sounds easy enough, right? Wrong. They don't have time, and it's really hard to figure out, how do I get that 5 minutes with them? And some of these doctors don't want to talk to you. And so that can be a hard thing to manage. And so a medical science liaison, you have to have an high EQ, that emotional intelligence. You have to be able to pivot your strategy. Maybe you're approaching this physician, and the way you approach that physician is going to be different from the way you approach this one at Ohio State or something like that, you know? It has to be different. So you really have to have a high EQ. And then potential job uncertainty. So kind of along the question that was asked, these drugs that they're working with, they are in clinical development. A majority of them are in phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. And the FDA, I think it's 10%, the FDA approves drugs that are given to them. That's nothing. That is barely any drugs really getting approval. And so you might have gone and joined this company and worked on their really novel Alzheimer's drug just for it to not get approved. So there will be a lot more layoffs in pharma because of that uncertainty. The only upside to that is there will always be something else cooler behind it. And there will be other drugs and other companies also working to find a cure in these diseases. So you may, I would say average tenure at most companies for a medical science liaison is 2 years, which is nothing at most companies. So that is one thing. You will end up maybe potentially working at more companies than in other positions. And then lastly, I'll just end with, if you are coming from a clinical setting, sometimes people do miss that hands-on direct patient care interaction because you are not seeing the patients as an MSL. You are talking with the physicians, but you are not there like a scribe next to that doctor seeing those patients. So that is something that people will miss if they really like touching the patients and talking with the patients. Medical science liaisons don't do that. So that's kind of a very broad, quick overview of a medical science liaison. It is a very unique role, and I know if you've never heard of it, you probably have more questions. So I am more than happy, my business cards are on the back. Feel free to reach out to me directly. I'd be more than happy to answer your questions if this ends up being a career path that you want to take, or if you want to take a career path as a recruiter as well. I'm happy to talk to you guys about that. So I'm going to just end quickly with some things that I have learned throughout my unique career path, and hopefully they'll be helpful for you guys. So the biggest thing, I think, from one of the lessons that I took from my career path is if you're not passionate about it, don't do it. I truly don't believe that I was passionate about becoming a PA. I could not get myself to sit down and truly put in the time to submit a polished application. And I think that showed. That's why I wasn't submitted. That's why I wasn't accepted into PA school. So if you're not passionate about it, don't do it. And if you haven't found your passion yet, keep looking. It'll come to you. Just don't give up, and don't say no to opportunities quickly. Talk to people. Networking, it's a word that we all throw around, network, network, network. But there's a reason for it, because it really will help you, especially if you do have a major in the Department of Psychology, where you can, I was telling a story earlier how I went to the career counselor and I said, if I don't want to be a PA, what can I do with my career? And they said, anything you want. And I was like, well, thank you, but I would like a little bit more direction than that. But looking back at that, he was right. I could do anything with my degree, and you guys can too. And so I really want to encourage you guys, don't say no quickly to an opportunity if you're not sure about it. Fact find more, ask questions, and network. Meet more people. The more you know, the more you'll be able to find your passion and your career path. I think Michigan does a good job of teaching us, keep thinking outside the box. I think that's a really, really understated tool that you guys should do. Keep thinking outside the box. If it's not there, you can create it. And lastly, I think if you want to do it, you will. If you guys want this career, you will do it, and you will take yourself farther than you could have imagined, and you might be up here in 10 years speaking as well about your career path. So I really encourage you guys to ask those questions, meet people, and that is all I have for you guys. So are there any questions, comments, concerns? Yes?
Do you find that people who have this career have a sort of work-life balance where they have a family and they can also do this career?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So work-life balance as an MSL, yes, definitely. Especially mothers will get really worried about this, especially if they're trying to create a family and things like that. Yes, it's all about balance, and that's kind of where you having to be responsible for your own schedule comes into play, but absolutely. And so maybe if you don't want to travel so much, you maybe work on a different type of disease where maybe there's not as many physicians in your territory, and so you're not having to travel as much. But yes, work-life balance is a big piece of that, and you obviously will find teams that don't have that, but most of them do. So good question. Any other? Yes?
You said you were a student here back in the day. If you could go back, is there any career advice that you'd like to give yourself when you were struggling to decide what you wanted to do?
Good question. I think that the best thing I would have done if I was an undergrad, I think I wish I would have talked to more people. And that's actually a big thing I wanted to bring up. So I'm on LinkedIn, find me, connect with me. I highly recommend you guys start a LinkedIn. You don't need to have a ton of your information on it, but use it as a free search tool. You can search based on degrees, you can search based on universities, and just look at different people's career paths and say, okay, who graduated with BCN? Who graduated with psychology on LinkedIn, and see what companies they're working for. See what their title is, because titling is different from company to company, which makes it difficult as well. So I would really recommend you guys get on LinkedIn. You don't need to have a lot on yourself. Use it as a free resource tool to figure out what different career paths people at Michigan took. So, yes.
Hey, I noticed a lot of the background for these medical science liaisons are more clinically focused.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of, are these the same opportunities for people that do preclinical research, or is there something else that you guys would serve those kind of, serve different roles for those kind of individuals?
No, that's a great question. No, preclinical is absolutely a great space for a starting platform for a medical science liaison, because they are, as an MSL, all these teams, they want different backgrounds. They want one person or a couple people with clinical perspective so they can bring that direct patient care. And then they want people with that preclinical experience so they can say, okay, I understand the mechanism of action down to this very minute molecular level, and they can then explain it. But yes, we see a ton of preclinical people that will then go into a medical science liaison. Great question. Yeah, they like diverse backgrounds. They like to bring different perspectives. I work with a lot of PhD students from Michigan, which also join your alumni departments or join your alumni clubs wherever you guys decide to move to after you graduate. Really great resource. I highly recommend you guys join your alumni clubs. And your degree at Michigan is going to help you guys a ton. Michigan people love that I have a degree from Michigan, and they remember that. Even Ohio State people love it as well. They love to give that banter. But your degree is going to take you guys a lot of places. Use it. It is to your advantage. That's why you guys go to a university like this. People talk about that impact. It's true. I have seen firsthand how much my degree has given me and how much more trust even these candidates will give me, because they're like, oh, she graduated from Michigan. Yep. But great question. Anything else? Yeah.
So I'm actually not a psychology major,
Okay.
a BCN major, but I'm actually a pharmaceutical science major.
Oh,
so
cool.
I find this really interesting. But I was more like wondering, like, as an MSL, you said that you had to be like very understanding of people and being able to read that. If I like in my case, I'm just a very social person, I guess you could say. Would that still work out as an MSL or?
Absolutely. MSLs are social creatures. They love socializing, yes. And I actually, one of my good friends went and graduated with his PharmD degree here, undergrad PharmD here, and is now a medical science liaison. He lives in Chicago. He works for a mid-sized company in rare disease. He loves it. Yes, this is a social job. If that's your big thing, an MSL might be a really good path for you. Mm-hmm. Did you have a question?
Yeah. What skills have you felt like have helped you the most in like being successful at recruiting?
Yeah, great question. I think one of the biggest skills is having a high EQ. I mentioned that, emotional intelligence, but you have to come in and talk to I have to talk to strangers all day long. That's all I do. I call people that live in New York, that live in California. You have to be able to read the room and pivot and ask questions. Always learn more and never come in assuming you know something about somebody. Really, that's the biggest skill that's really helpful as a recruiter. And I know I spent a lot of time as an MSL. A recruiting role is an awesome career path. One of my really good friends, I think she graduated not in the Department of Psychology here. I want to an English major, something like that. Now, she's been doing recruiting for 10 years. She's extremely successful. It is a great career path, but you have to be comfortable talking with strangers. And so I think that's the biggest tool that's been helpful for me is I don't approach anybody the same, and I ask questions, and I want to learn, and I listen. That's a big key, right? We can talk a lot, but are you actually listening to what the person's saying? Are you remembering these things? And are you bringing that personalized touch as well? That would be my best advice there. Good question. Anything else? How are we doing on time? We're doing good. Well, if that's it, thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. Please find me on LinkedIn. My business cards are back there. You can call, email me, any questions. I'd love to follow up. I hope this was very helpful for you guys. Thank you. Cool.